Welcome back to the Lap Podcast. This is episode 9, Lone Star Refresh.
In this episode, we're breaking down McLaren's opportunity going into the Grand Prix weekend, Liam Lawson's second debut, catching up on the second break, and more.
I know I say this a lot, but we're back!
We're back. Listen to that music. You know what time it is.
We're back once again, back better than ever, some may say. Some maybe not.
I think everyone should say that.
Yeah?
Back
We're
and better than
back
ever.
And better than ever. But
of course.
Welcome back to another episode of this Lapped Podcast. Let me take a quick moment to set the scene here as we are coming in.
Paint the picture.
Paint this picture. Thank you. Going into this weekend, let's remember where we left off. Lando Norris had another dominant win, coming just shy of a Grand Slam due to a Daniel Ricciardo fastest lap in his now final race. Norris won the challenging streets of Singapore by over 20 seconds over championship rival Max Verstappen, who finished in P2 following a dramatic media weekend for the Dutchman. In P3 was Norris's teammate and Oscar Piastri, 21 seconds behind Verstappen, and rounding out the top 5 was George Russell of Mercedes, Charles Leclerc of Ferrari, both a full minute behind Lando Norris. So as we walk into Austin,
our home race,
quite literally. I mean, it's just a few hours away for us. I wish we could go, but it's going to be a jam-packed weekend. I mean, there's Texas, Georgia happening.
Hey,
you're
not to make this a football podcast, but I am definitely a Texas fan. Big weekend last weekend. It's gonna be another big weekend this weekend. Hey, Austin is doing it. Also, you saw Dua Lipa there last weekend for ACL. Austin's doing it, man.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Austin right now. I mean, there's always something, but going into this race weekend, I want to start with McLaren. I mean, they obviously had a monster Singapore, but as it pertains to this Grand Prix, beyond bringing back an absolutely sick livery,
I love it, man.
With the homage back to the Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, championship year.
Can't go wrong with the chrome.
I mean, it's sick. It's very clean. I'm not a big fan of orange, generally speaking, or yellow.
Well, that's okay because we're papaya.
Papaya, whatever. But, as Oscar put it, chrome in his social media post. It looks really good. I'm going to give them a lot of credit. It looked really clean last year when Lando did the chrome helmet at
it was so nice.
At Silverstone too. So the fact they finally just, balled out with this chrome look, I love it. I hope they keep it.
That would be sick, right? If they did keep it. But also another thing to think about, I just want to give this shout out to McLaren's social media team in particular. Because one, they're goated. They do incredible work with their photography.
I don't want to single them out. Everybody's got a really good social media game in Formula One these days.
True, that is true. I think a lot of Formula One teams, because
Aston Martin's got this nice little, cinematic thing they like to do from time to time. They're pretty much on it too. And Mercedes are really big into memes, funny enough.
In the media space that we work in, a lot of we were kind of talking about this off air actually the other day. A lot of teams will get credit from their fans when they have a good social media presence, whether if they're funny, whether if they're just informative, whether if they just do it right. And McLaren's team in particular, as you might imagine, being the McLaren fan here, I follow them. So they do a really good job of not just taking pictures with new age cinematography or new age camera equipment, but going back in time, they're using these old cameras, these old film, these old techniques, and putting together these cool pictures. And a lot of other teams and a lot of other sports have carried on. I'm not saying McLaren started it. I'm just saying that they started incorporating these things and using something like a new livery, like all these different aspects of these cars. It looks sick.
Yeah.
All that to say, the livery's badass. Please keep the chrome.
I mean,
chrome.
Look, it looks great. It's timeless, man. It works. It's now worked again across generations.
Just think about the pictures this weekend. Literally every bit of the track is going to be reflected off of the car.
Oh, they're going to cook. They're going to cook on their social media.
Well, I mean, it's just going to suck. They're going to be all by themselves out up front.
Oh, which is now going to lead into where I was trying to go with this segment. The United States Grand Prix, it's posing a massive opportunity for Lando Norris to kind of ebb into Max Verstappen's championship lead that much more. He'll need some help from his teammate, though, and this is where I want to highlight this big opportunity. The difference was 6 races to go, 52 points, and with the math, doing the math part, Lando's going to need to average at least 9 more points than Verstappen per race weekend over these final stretch, of the season. Piastri, his role here, he's really going to have to create that gap between the two, because having them finish 1-2 is a no-go for Lando's title chances, in my opinion. Look, it's not even an opinion, it's just math. It's a 7-point margin to finish 1-2 without that fastest lap, creating that 8, right? So Oscar really has to kind of come into his own here. This is where I think this is a really good opportunity for us to see McLaren really start to, put everything behind Lando.
Say Max comes back and Red Bull comes back and they bring it, mainly Max, but they bring back a massive upgrade and they come back in the second half of this season and Max is fighting in the podiums again. But not just fighting in the podiums using 125% of that car, but fighting in the podiums because they kind of figured out the car a little bit more. Oscar's going to have to force a McLaren 1-2 at least probably 3 to 4 times this year before it's all said and done to give to give Lando that fighting chance. Because if Max comes back with a competitive car and he's competing in the podiums, they're going to have to force a couple of 1-2s.
Look, Oscar has to finish ahead of Max and at least behind Lando.
Right.
Like that's a given. If this is all 3 of those guys are hitting the podium,
that's what
Max
I'm saying.
Cannot come higher than 3rd place
because
for Lando Norris to have a championship opportunity.
Because
that's at least a 10-point buffer.
Right.
But in 11 if Norris can snag that fastest lap. But basically McLaren are kind of in do or die time. Like if for some reason Max Verstappen wins a race the rest of the season, that kind of puts to bed that championship.
Right. And I think this weekend in the next 2 to 3 weekends, the next 2 to 3 races, I should say, will tell a lot for what Red Bull is going to have for the rest of the year. If they come back and Max is P5, P6, P4, then we kind of know what we're going to be dealing with. We know that, okay, it's going to be left up to McLaren to continue this lead for the Constructors 1, and it's going to be up to Lando to take over and finish off this driver standings. But like I said, if Red Bull come back, and we never know, Red Bull's powerful.
This is a weekend to weekend kind of sport.
Yeah, the Red Bull's powerful. Like you can't just dismiss a former champion just because they've been on a low.
You also can't discount. I'm not trying to rake down the optimism here, but you can't discount a bad qualifying out of McLaren, for instance.
Exactly. I mean, it's
like
literally
we saw
happened.
Baku.
Yeah, it literally has happened. This is, like you said, weekend to weekend sport. This sport is insane. Anything can happen at any given moment. A random car can be put on the podium just because of a certain track condition, a certain weather condition, a certain pit stop strategy.
George
doesn't
Russell
work.
got Mercedes' first win this year because your boy and Max collided. I mean, that's just how the sport works out sometimes.
Exactly. I mean, and there's going to be some weekends in the second half where McLaren fans are happy because even though Lando had a bad weekend, he finished ahead of Max in some way, somehow. Maybe it is or isn't on the podiums.
I think the barrier for happiness for you guys, though, has to absolutely be at least 9 points. It has to be a 9-point difference. That's the only way you walk out of a weekend happy. Again, because just to kind of recontextualize it here, they can't afford for a Lando Norris championship to be a deficit, weekend.
Right.
He can't be behind Max at all. He has to finish ahead of Max these final 6 races with at least a 9-point gap to bring it to a narrow championship win in Abu Dhabi.
And I'll finish off with this. Obviously, Lando's got to finish ahead of Max, but it really is going to be up to Oscar, which he has came out and said that he's committed to helping Lando win. Despite all of the stuff that was happening earlier on in the year, it is really going to be up to Oscar to finish ahead of Max. Lando's got to do his job, obviously, but it's going to be up to Oscar to finish ahead of Max to keep that distance as far as they can, and him to compete. And we've already seen with the young Australian that he can defend very well.
Yes,
he's a really good defender, which is going to come into this battle primarily whenever he has a good car on a good weekend and he's in his stride.
I would argue that the stars are kind of aligned here for Lando. His job here is to just not screw it up.
Right.
I mean, the teammates on your side, next year will be what it is. Right.
Next year is going to probably be
whoever's faster, right? They'll settle it on track, and then that's who the team is going to, make their moves behind.
Right.
But as far as this season is concerned, Lando's been killing it in qualifying, generally speaking. He's putting himself in a really good position. He had a monster he had a monster showing, in Singapore.
Big time.
Another just dominant win. When he's won this year, it's been, except for maybe Miami, it's been incredibly, outstanding.
Yeah.
Right? I think this is a perfect weekend. This is not one of the most challenging tracks on the calendar. It's a proper circuit. Not a street race anymore. The factors are a lot less, in your face, so to speak, when it comes to Austin. And as far as I can tell, the weather's going to be perfect. I mean, it's cooling down a little bit. We're finally experiencing fall weather here in Texas.
Yeah, I'm actually wearing a long sleeve and not regretting it driving up here.
But the conditions are going to look very favorable, God forbid. So everything really does kind of come down to Lando Norris's ability to just continue to capitalize. This is a really strong opportunity for McLaren as an overall unit here to, put a good showing out there, not just from one driver, but from two, and to look incredibly organized, to show that there's been actual growth here as well, especially along the pit wall, the strategy, from the engineering all the way to race day. Coming together as a team, this is another huge opportunity to show not only that we can win, but we can win consistently. But that's not to say that there aren't teams that can throw wrinkles into this.
Oh, yeah.
Alternatively, other teams bringing the fight this upcoming weekend. By the way, this is also a sprint weekend. I don't want to forget that this is also another opportunity for Lando to get some more points.
That's a very important part to highlight. Yeah.
Yeah, these sprint weekends, by the way, help make that factor in. But other teams that could bring the fight this weekend, I wanted to highlight Mercedes, and not just because Mercedes fan. I really think that Mercedes here could play an interesting factor. There's a lot of what ifs here, so don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to get big-headed about this segment. It's just they have been toting and they have been previewing and they have been talking very confidently about this final upgrade package going into this weekend. The team struggled with upgraded floor configurations since about Spa, a race they finished in 1-2 before George Russell's disqualification gave Lewis Hamilton his 105th win. But also a weekend where they initially brought a revised floor. They instead swapped out due to a number of issues in practice. The floor was again tested in Zandvoort, still kind of a hindrance. But coming into this weekend, Mercedes are bringing their final upgrade package of the season at the Austin Grand Prix, a race where Hamilton has won a chart-topping 5 times and finished in second place last year before a disqualification due to the board on the bottom of the car basically being chipped away. Same thing happened to Charles Leclerc, funny enough, in third. Mercedes have 3 times this year and twice on merit won. So could they pose an interesting wrinkle into this championship battle this particular weekend? I think they can, if they're able to come between the Mercedes and the Red Bulls, the McLarens and the Red Bulls. Heck, if they pull something astounding out of their hats, if they find themselves out in front, I guess I'll ask you this. Do you think Mercedes has a chance to even play spoiler here, considering, again, finishing a minute back in Singapore? Do you feel like there's an actual threat here, considering they progressed really well this year as far as upgrades?
Yeah, they're not... Let's see. They're not out of it, right? They're not out of competing for... Well, before I answer, let me rephrase this question back to you. What do you think what do you think Mercedes is fighting for? What is their end goal for the end of the year?
I think that for them, it's kind of a lot of moral victories. Like, they look like they're in a 4th place position. Ferrari are still technically within that mix at the top of the leaderboards, but they're in 3rd place. They're looking to overtake Red Bull for 2nd, right? I think Mercedes, it's not even I think, they are just mathematically very far back. So for them, going into these final 6 weekends, for them, it's about moral victories and allowing Lewis Hamilton to leave the team in good graces as well as on a high note. For them, that's Toto Wolff has said that in the media. We're not winning championships this year, of course, but we're trying to end this year on a high note. So for them, a win in Austin, where he's, again, already won 5 times. I don't think he's ever not podiumed there. But again, outside of last year's just DQ. He's never not podiumed in Austin, as far as I can remember.
Right.
It's a really strong race for them. I think this is their, not so much of a Hail Mary, but I think for them, they see this as a huge opportunity at a track they feel comfortable with historically. For them, it's about scraping together moral victories, as well as on-track victories, of course.
So I will say this. I think they have a real opportunity. I do think they could play spoiler. I do. I think they could ruin some teams' chances of shaking things out.
If you're Red Bull, you have to be kind of worried, I would imagine.
I mean, I think if you're Ferrari, Red Bull, or McLaren, you got to be worried because guess what? Mercedes really doesn't have anything to lose. They're kind of already locked in that P4 for constructors, win or lose kind of situation. So they're kind of already like, hey, we know where we're going to finish. We're not really competing for P3. We're not really competing, either way. Which isn't to say they're not going to try their best. Obviously, they're going to try their best. But yeah, they're definitely going to play spoiler. They're going to try to ruin some seasons. They're going to ruin some races. And I don't mean that like, they're going to...
Yeah, they're not crashing people
yeah,
out.
but they're going to put together...
But if you're Red Bull walking into this weekend,
you're
like, we need to hit a podium.
They're a sneaky team that's going to be right there. Because here's the deal. This is what Mercedes has done all year. Their fundamentals. They have been really good at being right there, right place, right time to swoop in for some victories, to swoop in for some major points. And if they just continue to race fundamentally and they just continue to be at the right place, right time, and they, if they bring this upgrade in, it's a big deal. Yeah, they're going to screw around and they're going to mess up some teams. They're going to compete in some places where it's going to knock off a couple of points in some areas.
Yeah.
Again,
I kind of mentioned this. Like, if you're Red Bull, maybe not McLaren so much, they're going to be fighting for the race win, but if you're Red Bull, you might have to be on your P's and Q's, knowing that Mercedes are walking in with this massive upgrade.
I mean,
you need
look at Max
to be as close as possible to these McLarens.
Exactly.
If you're stuck between two silver bullets, so to speak, silver arrows here, that's a massive point deficit to what's the gap at this moment? 52 points.
Yeah, if you're sandwiched in between two Mercedes, if you're Max,
or you're behind them.
Yeah, either or. I mean, hell, that could ruin. That could ruin your driver standings. Now, you'd be McLaren's best friend. That's what I'm saying. Like, Mercedes has a real chance to sneakily ruin and make some seasons, depending on, I guess, what side of the fence you're on. I really think Mercedes is going to just do their best, let Lewis and George race, and wherever the chips may fall, they fall. And look, I'm not going to say...
They've got everything to gain and nothing to lose.
Exactly. They have nothing to lose. They could go all out on strategy.
Mm-hmm.
George can be the tire whisperer for the rest of the year, and you never know what could happen. Mercedes could win a race before the end of the year is over. Because guess what? We didn't think that was going to happen this year, and it's happened already a couple of times.
3 times.
Yeah. So they could win by the end of the year. That's not going to be... That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever by the slightest, just based on how fundamentally they drive. Does that make sense?
No.
Fundamentally, they're just doing the right things. They're not pushing their limits to the point where they're risking DNFs. They're not risking crashing. They're not... I mean, you have 2 solid drivers, obviously. Lewis knows what he's doing. George has proven that he knows what he's doing. And they're in a solid car. Bring some upgrades, yeah, they can compete for real.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. Again, if they feel like they have real confidence within this upgrade package, I'm excited to see exactly what they're going to bring this weekend. They've done really well in qualifying at certain times this year. They've, again, won races, but, man, playing that spoiler would make things so interesting for this weekend.
I mean, that's going to be fun for you.
It'd be fun for me. Even if one of them lands on the podium, I think I'll be happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, again, McLaren, they look like the class of the field right now. With all due respect, right now it looks like it's going McLaren's way. They've got the constructors kind of locked up. But if you can kind of simultaneously ruin Red Bull's season at the same time, that's not even just a moral victory. That's just a middle finger down the paddock, to your friends like Christian Horner and company.
Yeah, which Toto and Christian, they're big friends.
They're good friends, don't get me wrong, but there's also, of course, a professional rivalry there. But speaking about Red Bull, as we head into Austin, the driver to win at the circuit the second most is Max Verstappen at 3. Now, Red Bull have been successful here, but the weight of Red Bull's tumble has really been the story for most of the back half of this season. And the speculation as to whether or not they can do enough to keep F1's probably the best driver in the entire sport at the moment happy is a weekly conversation, right? A key figure within the team, Helmut Marko, speaking to the media, Germany's RTL, I believe, saying most big drivers have exit clauses in their contract that are performance related, and so does Max. If we can't give him a car to fight at the front, it'll definitely be something we're thinking about as far as whether or not he exercises that kind of a clause. I think Red Bull need to have a strong weekend. Not only, I mean, of course, throughout the rest of the year to try to maintain that championship, but I think they really have a lot of pressure going into this weekend. They need to keep Max happy.
I think they need to do a little bit more PR training. Because it sounds, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, we've all heard different things from this camp. I mean, Helmut Marko's saying this, Max is saying that he doesn't want to leave, and, you got Horner saying that he's looking for Russell. Like, this camp does not stay consistent with what they're saying.
Yeah. I mean,
or am I just not hearing right?
Speaking about, like, their media performance... look, their overall performance is kind of where things are going to come down to for Max. Like, their performance has dwindled, so their chances of keeping, again, one of F1's biggest talents, especially as a number of the key figures in the team are also leaving, by the way. Like, it's not also just Marco's comments or the controversy with Christian Horner for me. If I'm Red Bull, the pressure is going to be more than on. It's going to be incredibly high within the team. And on top of that, you've got guys like Adrian Newey leaving to go to like Aston Martin. You've got key figures in Jonathan Wheatley going to Audi. You've got a number of engineers leaving and going across the paddock to successful teams now with McLaren. And again, your competitors again with like Mercedes and even down the paddock with like, Alpine and Audi. Basically, everybody's leaving. Everybody's jumping ship. Red Bull are kind of going into this. It looks like they're heading towards a twilight. Right? It's their championships, obviously their window is beginning to close quite rapidly, but their entire emphasis going forward is going to be trying to just keep Max happy. I consider this weekend a bit of a Hail Mary, right? Like, you've got to bring a good enough upgrade to keep Max happy and confident in this team, because he's voiced his very real concerns about whether or not he even wants to stay in the sport long term.
Right.
The only way I think that you can continue to incentivize Max Verstappen is by bringing him successful championship-level cars, which, it's all just organizational at that point.
Or a competitive teammate.
Competitive teammate.
I mean, serious, Tristan. I mean, look at it. Like, if you're Max, why would you want to stay in an environment that is seemingly toxic? I think that's safe to say. A little toxic. And you're not in I mean, let's just, facts are facts. Your driver championship is getting wasted away because you don't have a competitive teammate to help you out. So who's to say that Max is like, look, I get it this year. We don't have a very competitive car. We got a lot of changes going on. But look, next year, if we have this same issue, we're going to have to make some changes.
I mean, look, the driver opposite of Max, I don't think Max is so much concerned about his teammate. I think Max is a little bit more in the business of winning drivers' championships at this stage of his career. I'm not saying that he's not a team player, but his history has shown otherwise, right? For him, I don't think it's so much about having a competitive teammate. The organizational needs for Red Bull are to have good teammates, a good driver pairing regardless. But when it comes to again, for me, it's a matter of keeping the best driver in the sport on your side. If this is the guy that's elevating your car, at one point you said this podcast, 125% of its abilities, you're doing that and putting this car on the podium when his teammate is barely finishing in P10. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the status of that car. I'm not saying that that's necessarily where the vehicle performance truly is at this time.
Well, I mean, we've agreed on multiple occasions that, I'll say his name, Checo is not driving to the performance of that car. He's underperforming in that car. That is not a P10 car.
No, it's not. But I don't think that that's necessarily a Max Verstappen issue. I think that has nothing to do with him. That's absolutely everything to do with Checo underperforming.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I disagree that he's not just fighting for drivers' championships at this level, but how long is he going to handle? How long is he going to deal with Checo just wasting away these points? I mean, because at a certain point, you're not even talking about constructors. You're talking about, hey, I have a driver's championship that is just getting ruined.
At a certain point, you're looking at, if you're Max Verstappen, I think you're looking across the paddock. I think you're looking across the garage, and you're looking at your teammate and goes, well, it's kind of you problem. Like the organizational standpoint for Red Bull being like, well, that's y'all's problem, right? For him, again, I think it's just more or less an interest of like, you're just chasing the driver's championship here. It's not your problem if Checo Perez is driving poorly. That's Red Bull's problem because that's a constructor's issue and that's team revenue loss for them, right? I just think going into this weekend, you just need to show signs of life. Like getting the podium last time out was awesome. That was fantastic, but I would argue for sure that Max was outperforming the vehicle. Right?
He most of the time does.
Which he does. That's kind of where he is in his career, right? He's able to elevate even a standard car into being a good car, right? A great car into being a championship level car, right? But at the end of the day, it's really going to be up to Red Bull to kind of have the onus here to show that Max, it's worth sticking around here. We can become a championship level team. You know, you don't have to leave and go somewhere else, like Aston Martin, for instance, and sacrificing Lance Stroll to the F1 gods. But there are other teams along this paddock. It was a quiet offseason, more or less, for Ferrari, but I did read something that stuck out to me. Speaking to ESPN this past week, Charles Leclerc, said more or less that he thinks that Ferrari has a 2025 title shot. And to back that up, understanding quite a lot of things, excuse what he said, we are understanding quite a lot of things, seeing quite a lot of gains. We just need time to bring those in the form of upgrades on the car. So Ferrari seemed to be on his upwards trajectory as the field has gotten a lot tighter. Right now, they're fighting for P2, coming up from P3. Generally speaking, while McLaren are still kind of out in front of this stage, Ferrari are consistently competitive this year. I don't think there's any reason to count them out any given weekend across the board, similar to how we talk about like Mercedes earlier in this podcast. Leclerc has got some wins at Monaco, Monza, Sainz got that win in Australia. Next year, they're going to be bringing in one of the all-time greats in Lewis Hamilton. So going into year 3, under Fred Vasseur, who's had a long history of success across many different levels of this sport, I think we're going to finally start to see the labors and the fruits of all of that effort coming together in 2025. The regulations are going to be well understood. The car should hopefully be very well understood as far as walking into, free practice next year, right? Those 3 practice days. Are Ferrari real threats in 2025? I understand this weekend we're kind of stepping aside from Austin, so to speak. They're going to be within that mix, I'm sure, but I don't know if they're necessarily going to win a race this weekend. But as we look ahead a little bit,
they're a more competitive Mercedes, as in when we're talking about spoilers.
Yeah,
like they're more competitive than Mercedes, but they're just really there to play spoiler.
Yeah. Well, as far as this year, but as far as like
for this year,
2025,
yeah, just as far as things go this weekend and on. But yeah, in 25, they're definitely going to be competitive. I mean, you're talking about Charles Leclerc and you're talking about Lewis Hamilton. I mean, that driver pairing alone, I don't care what James Vowell says, is very good. I mean, that's a very competitive. I mean, very competitive.
That's the best driver lineup.
That's what I'm saying. That is the best driver lineup. Now, on paper, that goes into any sport. On paper, things can look perfect, but that doesn't always perform. That doesn't always make the points happen, right? Ferrari isn't a do or die moment because you don't know how many years you have Lewis for that is going to be his best. Let's just say it as it is. Mm-hmm. He's not Lewis Hamilton of old. He's still fantastic. He's still one of the best drivers on the grid. We all know that, right? But you got to reach those prime years with Charles with those last great years of Lewis, and that is now. So you can't, as Ferrari, walk into 25 and be misfiring, right? You can't just get off on the wrong foot, which Ferrari is known to do, is get off on the wrong foot, fix it, and finish the year. You got to start on the right foot. Mm-hmm. They're under a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure.
I mean, as we creep into the 2025 season, as we get ever so much closer to it, I mean, not like I'm trying to rush for this year to be over with already, but next year is going to be insane. I think Ferrari are definitely going to be within that realm of like championship possibility. I think Mercedes, if they do it right, they could be a very interesting team within that mix. Of course, they got a rookie driver in their lineup, but I would say your papaya team is still kind of classing the field. If you had to put money down right now, it'd be, McLaren are probably going to win a championship next year. But
yeah, but you don't know
the infrastructure that Ferrari are bringing. Again, Fred Vasseur coming into year 3. These are all his guys now. This is now officially his team. The Binotto stuff, like, if anybody was Binotto's guy, right? Like, you are now either Fred Vasseur's guy or you are no longer with Ferrari, more or less. Vasseur is finally, this is his team. There's no more holdovers, I guess what I'm trying to get at. So, Vasseur's had a lot of really, really prolonged success, again, throughout the course of his career in other different series, from F3 to F2 to F1, from being the Sauber, team principal to now being the Ferrari team principal, even that short time he spent with Renault. The dude cooks. I'm really excited to see what this team looks like next year. I'm curious to see how that driver dynamic works. Obviously, Fred's had very good relationships with both these drivers in the past, but your first rival is your teammate. There's going to be a lot to look forward to with Ferrari going into next year. Right now, Ferrari are, again, they're kind of hanging around in P3. They might be fighting into P2 here very shortly, but I think that next year, if I had to guess, Ferrari might be that team that really plays spoiler for that championship. I really do. But there are other teams on this grid. Aston Martin walking into Austin, more than just a livery. They're joining the list of teams with new liveries on the way for this weekend, celebrating the launch of Generation 3 with their partners Aramco. I did some Googling. I read up on the announcements. But the overall performance question, what do you think we can really expect from Aston Martin this weekend? Do you think they're going to close out the top 10, or do we expect one driver in, one driver out? How does that dynamic look?
I think one driver in, one driver out is realistic. But I could also see double podium double points.
I know you love Lance Stroll.
The other P word. I think you could see double points, but I also could see double. What would you say? Double out of the points? How would you?
I mean, a 0 points weekend.
Yeah, 0 points weekend.
The car looked really nice going around Austin.
I would say 8 through 14 is possible.
Yeah.
For either driver in that car.
I think the expectations are kind of where they are appropriately with Aston Martin at this time. I mean, even going into next year, I think the team more or less is just looking forward to when Adrian Newey gets there.
Look, just because you drive through Houston, that ain't going to win my love over, okay? Just saying.
I don't get that reference, but okay.
Well, I mean, because they put the Aston Martin on the highway and raced it.
Oh, they did?
In downtown Houston.
Oh, so Houston got to deal with even more traffic? That's cool. Look, Houston needed any more traffic.
Drive it through Dallas and maybe we'll talk, okay, Lance? But no, on a serious note, I mean, you're right. Aston Martin is Aston Martin. They are where they are. They've made their bed. They're going to lay in it, and
they're
a double points weekend would be great for them, but I don't see it.
No, I think, yeah, they're in 5th place right now. The constructors, they're kind of inoffensive. They're classing up the bottom end of the grid, but they're not necessarily fighting for anything special. I think if we saw anything Aston Martin even sniffing a podium this year, it would absolutely be Fernando Alonso. I don't expect them to make so much noise. I don't know that they're bringing any major upgrades into this weekend as well. I think it's more or less, okay, cool, they got a nice livery. But as we continue to move down the so-called constructors standings at this point of the podcast, we have a second debut creeping up this weekend. Liam Lawson debut number 2 with Daniel Ricciardo out at VCarb. The junior Red Bull team is bringing in Liam Lawson to battle with and against Yuki Tsunoda. And when I'm deeming a kind of like 6-race test flight for the Red Bull to assess their options with that second seat, we've already spent podcast after podcast after podcast lambasting Checo's performances, or lack thereof. How major is this weekend for Liam Lawson, Kevin?
I think it kind of gives us the opportunity to see what he can do without the potential of him being, I guess, sent back down, if that makes sense. I mean, like, it's his. The seat is his, and he's gonna have to show us what he can do within the time period that he's been given. And it's a relatively competitive car, relatively.
I mean, it's a car that's good enough to hit the points.
Yeah, like he can do some stuff, and he let's put it this way, he can impress with this car. Some cars you can't. This car you can impress. You can show us, okay, I can fight in the points. I can maximize this car and get everything out of it with what I am given. Sure. I think you can see a lot from Liam to end out the last part of this year.
Do we think he's going to beat Yuki first race out?
I will say maybe. And I say, wow. I know, very definitive.
What a bold answer.
Extremely definitive answer out of me. I will say maybe, and I think that is because Yuki in the past has been a little bit more racy, as Tristan might say. He's a little bit more daring. Yuki is whenever it comes to driving. He crashes every now and then, DNFs every now and then. And not to say that Liam won't. Being that he is a young driver, but I just expect him to race a little bit more carefully, I guess, maybe.
You think he's just going to walk into this weekend a lot more conservative?
A lot more, I would say a lot more conservative. A lot more conservative than Yuki anyway. And for that reason, I think there could be a couple of instances where we see Liam out-qualify, maybe even outrace Yuki.
So you think by being conservative, he's going to effectively finish ahead of Yuki?
Well, not just being conservative, being a little bit more conservative than Yuki and trying to maximize that car. Because I think me and you could both agree that Liam is more talented than Yuki. Is that a fair statement?
I think I would go there. I like Liam Lawson more than I like Yuki Tsunoda, generally speaking.
Like raw talent-wise, I think Liam...
Based on what we saw out of him last year, I thought Liam Lawson should have had an opportunity in Formula One. I think he's a very talented driver. He's got real pace. Sure, I would go there.
So if that is true, then yes, I believe that Liam will, if he doesn't do it this weekend, eventually he will out-qualify and outrace Yuki. And I think this weekend could be one of those weekends he could.
I mean, if he grabs points in his debut, I think the conversations are going to really heat up again with Checo. Checo would have to finish, if Checo finishes below 7th, like, I think those conversations are really going to start to heat up once again. Not that, like, it's like we come on every time for this podcast and try to find reasons to hate on Checo, but the man's just giving us material.
He might retire. I don't know.
I mean, he's saying he's not. But anyway, I think Lawson does have what it takes. I think he's very comfortable within the organization. I mean, he's been this will they, won't they kind of thing. For him, I think it's about putting his foot down and really stamping out and really going.
I mean, I'm
here.
Yeah, he's had a moment to prepare now.
Well, yeah, what I'm getting at is, like, last year it was kind of taken away from him, right? Is how I think a lot of people who support Liam Lawson would feel. Is that opportunity should have been his from the get-go this year, but they decided to continue with Daniel Ricciardo, and now it is what it is. I think for Liam, he's walking into this weekend, and he's putting his foot down. This is I'm here, and you're not going to get rid of me kind of weekend. Unless he DNFs, which would be tragic. But I just don't see it. I really have a lot of high hopes for Liam Lawson. When we talk about more of our predictions later, by the way, I mean, I'll probably go a little bit more in depth there, too.
But real quick, just before we get out of this topic, do you think driving conservative would be something that we could see out of Liam? Is that a fair take out of me, or no?
I don't know if it's so much about conservatism. I think it's more or less about just think about it like football, right?
That helps.
Okay, think about it like football. The team that typically makes less mistakes is the one that kind of wins, right? That's traditionally what you'll see on like a football field. Both big football fans, right? I think Liam Lawson, by proxy of not making a lot of mistakes, but Yuki's good enough to not make a lot of mistakes either. But I think Liam Lawson can combine. I think he has the ability to take that, okay, look, I know what I fundamentally need to do here, and here's where I can push. I think he can mix that really well. I think that's what he brings to the table here. That's my opinion, though.
Okay.
But a couple more things to talk about before we wrap this thing up. Haas and Toyota entering a partnership effective immediately. One of the biggest stories coming out of the second break going into the USGP is this partnership. In fact, Toyota is going to exist alongside Haas with Ferrari still as the engine supplier, but they're going to work with Toyota Gazoo Racing on the technical and manufacturing side. So Haas are going to give Toyota commercial benefits within this deal. This should help give Haas a more competitive standing just across the board. I think I read recently that this is going to give them a true simulator for the first time.
Which is insane to
Which
think
I didn't
about.
know that Haas did not have a simulator. That's news to me.
But that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Toyota is now going to re-enter the sport in one way or the other for the first time since 2009, where they spent 8 years as a works team and an engine supplier. They landed 13 podiums. They were pretty successful. Their best finish overall was a 4th place finish in 2005 with Ralf Schumacher and then Jarno Trulli. So this partnership's going to be awesome. I'm honestly super optimistic. Haas have got something really, really
Fun.
well put together.
Yeah.
They've got Ollie Behrman coming in. He's a very exciting young driver. Esteban Ocon, savvy veteran driver coming over from Alpine, continuing to follow in the footsteps of Nico Hülkenberg historically. And Komatsu seems to have it well honed. They've done a really good job as far as upgrading, even with what they have. They're the smallest team on the grid. But this partnership, I think it opens up so much for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think it gives you a whole nother level of optimism and excitement for Haas going forward.
Yeah, I mean, simple, straightforward, well put. I think that this kind of partnership, I'm not going to go above and beyond and say this is what's going to give them a chance to win world championships, but it puts you in the conversation of being more than just a midfield team.
I'll put it to you this way. A couple years ago, Williams made a lot of moves that was like, okay, they're kind of like an interesting team now. Now they might not be at the bottom all the time. And Haas has, to our surprise, put together a couple of really good races this year. I mean, they have definitely outperformed what our expectations were for Haas this year. They're kind of getting themselves at a point where they're making moves where it's like Haas could really be competitive in the next few years. Yeah. And I like this move for Haas. And I like this move for Toyota. If they put together a really nice partnership, this could enter them back into the sport in multiple ways.
This could feed families.
Yeah, it could. Well, literally, it could. Yeah. Literally.
Now, I'm excited for this. I mean, Toyota, again, they had a pretty good run within Formula One. This is just another really good pickup for Haas, who've been really active on the sponsorship side of things lately. So, especially when it comes to these like lower field teams, you're always kind of rooting for them. It's almost like when you're watching, it's like watching anything else. You're always kind of rooting for the underdog in a way. Especially
if they're American. I mean,
the American-based team, the one and only Andretti. We can keep hoping. But you spoke about Williams a little bit. And speaking about Williams, their team principal had some comments during the break. His bold statement: Williams have the best driver lineup on the grid going into 2025.
Look,
we already kind of talked about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it's a really good driver lineup. We've on a separate podcast, we've talked about, wow, this is a really competitive driver lineup. You know, Carlos and Albon, like that's better than majority driver lineups, I think. But no, it's not the best. It's not.
I mean, Val's supporting argument here is he looks at Franco. I imagine they're probably going to keep him in that reserve role, which we've talked about a couple times as a soft prediction in case he doesn't end up with Sauber for some reason. But speaking about like Carlos Sainz, for instance, he said it's not that he hasn't been challenged throughout his career. These comments made on the Beyond the Grid podcast, by the way. I want to make sure I'm citing them. He's been challenged all the way through and held his own. Speaking about his times with like Toro Rosso when he raced against Max. Speaking about, of course, his time with Ferrari racing against Charles, McLaren racing with Lando. Right, he's raced against some of the best in the sport at various times of their careers. He's been able to more than hold his own, again, collecting race wins with Ferrari the last 2 seasons.
Right.
So, overall, though, again, I agree. I don't think they're the best. I certainly don't think they're anywhere near the bottom. This is a really, really, really good lineup, in my opinion. I would put them, as it stands right now, I'd put them fighting for third.
Yeah.
Third place.
I would say I would put them
They're behind Lando and Oscar for me as well.
I think we're seeing eye to eye. I think they're competing with Mercedes.
Yeah.
With best lineup. Because I think
we don't know what Antonelli looks like in the
Ferrari's one. Ferrari is one, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And from what we're seeing from Lando and what we've already seen from Oscar, McLaren lineup is 2. I think what we don't know about Kimi. And what we do know about George, we feel very confident about Mercedes going forward, just lineup wise.
And I feel confident about Kimi, but I'm not gonna put the cart before
but we
the
don't
horse
know
here too much. Yeah.
Right? We can feel confident about somebody and not know. They could overseed what we think they're gonna do, which would be
awesome.
Right. But I think I would put them in the competing stances in the 3-4 area, which is great.
Right now they're 3.
Like what me and Tristan were trying to do, I won't say a couple weeks ago, but a couple podcasts episodes ago was, look, this was a big move, landing Carlos.
Yeah.
This is really big for Williams, and we were trying to give them credit, and now it's like, hey, we gave you a little bit. We gave you a piece of bread. Don't ask for the entire freaking loaf,
Don't
dude.
oversell what you got here.
Yeah, we get it. You got a good lineup, but it ain't the best damn lineup on the grid.
Hopefully, Williams can kind of give them a car that exceeds the expectations in 2025.
But I love it for James. If
they hit the ground running in 26, this lineup is gonna eat.
Yeah,
it's gonna be ridiculous.
And look, we're all for giving Williams props. We've done it over and over and over again.
Plucky underdogs at this point. They're a historic racing family. They've been a part of the sport for almost the only other team that's been on the grid as longer is Ferrari. They are part of this sport. They are the part of the fabric of this sport. So many championships, right? So if Williams does well, I think it's good for the sport.
It's like
in football. If the Bears or the Raiders do well, it's just kind of good for the sport.
It's good for the sport if we don't have teams that are just always at the bottom every weekend.
Yeah.
Haas, Williams, those are some teams that you think of in the recent years where it's like, hey, they're always at the bottom. And they're trying to compete and they're trying to get out of the bottom.
Both of those teams, thankfully, have actually been doing a lot to improve that.
Exactly.
They've taken concerted effort.
And that's good for the sport. You don't want to go in every single weekend all right, Max is going to win and these teams are going to finish last. That is not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Bringing it all back. No, it's not the best lineup. It's a very competitive lineup, and I would love to see what they're going to do going forward. I appreciate the confidence from James to put his drivers, to put his lineup, to put his guys out there. But we're not quite there yet.
They're third. Speaking a little bit further down the grid, we can start wrapping up here in a moment, but I wanted to touch on Alpine. They had a really slow break, not a lot of news. They got a new livery adding to the list. They're arriving in orange in a bid to get Oscar Piastri, to forget which garage he's walking into.
Yeah, I'm glad you saw that.
In a ode to Indiana Jones, though, that's kind of where they're going, is they're promoting a video game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. There's your shout out.
They're just all about
and this is the second
movie
adjacent promotion that they've done this year. They had the Deadpool Wolverine livery at Spa that
didn't work.
Didn't
work.
Yeah, they didn't make the car any faster. So that's about it as far as Alpine. Sauber, still no word on that second seat. We're just kind of waiting on that. That'll be big news. We're certainly going to talk about that whenever
I think they're just waiting to see what the rest of the year shakes out to be. Yeah. I don't think there's any reason you need to make an announcement before the end of the year. See what all these young drivers can do, and
I think I'm going to disagree with you, actually.
Okay, then.
Yeah,
all right.
I will disagree.
Well, what do you think?
I think at a certain point, if you wait too long, it's about acclimation, right? The off season's about 3.5 months. If you wait until after Abu Dhabi, you're eating into your off-season time to get somebody up to speed with how the team works, what the infrastructure looks like. If you're bringing in a rookie driver of all things as well, right? You're bringing in somebody that hasn't been a Formula One driver, explaining to them how this works, getting them set up, getting them comfortable, again, putting them in place within this team. The longer you wait, especially if you're going to go bold and you're going to go young, you're going to go Gabriel Bortoleto, you're going to go Franco Colapinto if you can pull him away from Williams, right? If you're going to go with one of these younger drivers, Théo Pourchaire, Mick Schumacher is a name that was thrown around a little bit, right? Mick's obviously been around for a while. He'd be pretty quick to acclimate again. He's been with Mercedes for the last couple of years. I digress. You got to get somebody up to speed, especially no matter if you're bringing in somebody young but even just somebody new. The only way this kind of works out where it's not a big deal is if they just go with Valtteri and keep him on the team. But part of me doesn't really see that happening. I just think they're going to start going younger. These young rookies are really exciting, man.
And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
We talked about it a lot.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot. This is the new age where we're bringing in younger guys, where the veterans, I don't want to say they're not doing it anymore, but there's excitement. There's promise in these young guys. I agree. I do agree with you there. I do think, and I really hope that Sauber goes young. I want them to make a young decision. I personally don't have an opinion where they go. I've kind of voiced my opinion in the past, and it's kind of just fallen through. So I'm just excited to see what they do. I'm interested to see what they do, and I really want them to go young. But at this point, it really wouldn't surprise me no matter what they do.
I mean, I think I would be the most surprised if they
Who do you think lands it? Like right now. Yeah, who do you think lands it?
I'll say this. The most surprising would be Mick Schumacher. That would be the one that surprises me the most. Just because there's been so much back and forth with him and his management and his hopes, right? And because we all kind of want to see a Schumacher on the grid and doing well. But I think if I had to pick one person who's going to land with this team, I think it's probably going to be Gabriel Bortoleto. He's not reigning, but he's currently leading the F2 championship standings. He looks really exciting. McLaren have more or less given him the green light to go to Sauber if they decide to make that decision. I think that he looks really quick. Sounds like he's been really quick whenever it comes to the tests. I wouldn't be shocked. I think, if anything, Bottas would be a safe move, but I think if you asked me right now, feet to the fire, yes, Gabriel Bortoleto.
All right.
Yeah.
See what happens. Like I said, I really don't have an opinion. I really don't have a prediction. So we'll just go based off that.
We are starting to run down on time, though. I did want to mention we have our predictions still to go, but I wanted to mention one more thing, just because you and I are kind of like nerdy like that.
A little bit.
We like fun merchandise. Hot Wheels and F1. I wanted to make a quick mention of this. This is a partnership that came together during this last break. Multi-year partnership announced heading into the U.S. Grand Prix. These, the little toy cars are about a 64th scale of the actual car.
They're not toys, they're collectibles, Tristan.
Depends on who you ask, all right, Chief? So I hope they're able to put some cars together inspired by some of the great ones.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you could get like
Senna's MP4.
Yeah.
Or like you could go to the Johnny Walker Lotus 97T.
I mean, you got a ton of liveries that are like big deals.
Liveries,
sorry. I'll get used to it. I'm sorry. Stupid American.
No,
but
like
yeah.
The Red Bulls, the RB19, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Super dominant car. The RB9 would be super fun. One of Vettel's.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton.
I'm riling up numbers here.
Yeah, there's a ton to collect. There's a ton that you can make fun with, and I'm excited where the partnership will go.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I'm hoping
that Lego, all these different partnerships that they're doing.
They're accessible.
I love that. I love that they're becoming accessible, and this is how you grow. This is how F1 grows, and they're doing a great job.
Reaching that younger audience for sure. But Austin predictions as we wrap it up
Reaching
here.
my big pockets.
Let's hit our podium first. Who do you got? 1, 2, and 3.
I've got rounding out the podium. I've got Oscar
at 3.
Yes.
Okay.
I've got Charles P2 and Lando P1.
All right. So I'm gonna go 1 through 3. I got Lando taking it again. I think, again, this is like I talked about with Liam Lawson, at least. I think he's putting his foot down. I think he's trying to establish.
You think Lando and Liam are doing the same thing this weekend?
Dude, yeah. There's no reason they both can't. They're racing 2 completely different races.
I know. I'm just messing with you.
So Lando Norris, I think he's gonna take it. I think Oscar actually does his job. I think he's really gonna come through this weekend. I think it's gonna be a 1-2 for McLaren. This is gonna be a highlight win. And I think this is where it gets interesting. I got Lewis in P3.
Oh, big deal. No,
not because of the Mercedes.
You're interested with this upgrade.
Because of the upgrade, but also because don't you just want that to happen for the juiciness of this driver's championship? Because even if Max comes 4th or 5th, that's a wide gap.
Hey, I'm fine with Lewis finishing P3 as long as Max is far, far away from Lando.
I'm putting it together like this. Upgrades make sense.
Yep.
Hamilton's done very well here historically. And on top of that, Red Bull, again, they've been slipping. Do we have a DNF?
Well, I do want to talk because I didn't really get to explain mine. I think Charles could finish P2 or maybe a 1-2 would happen for McLaren. I do see that as a possibility, but Charles finishing P2, Charles finished the beginning of the year, or I guess what you would say the first half of the season, or however you would categorize it. He finished on a high. Mm-hmm. Charles was on fire every week, maximizing that car, doing a really good job. Yeah, first 3 quarters. He was doing a really good job. And I'm interested. I think he could kind of continue that.
The interesting correlation we both have here, though, is that Max is not on the podium.
No.
Which, regardless of, if Norris wins, which we both think is going to happen.
Right.
If Max is off the podium, the amount of points.
That's a lot of points.
Is huge. Do we have a first DNF?
First DNF is going to be Lance Stroll.
You think Lance Stroll is gonna?
I think he's gonna get confused. I think he's gonna think he's competing. He's gonna think he's got a teammate behind him. He's gonna think it's his good old buddy
Fernando
Alonso. But really, it's Oscar Piastri. He's gonna pass him, and he's gonna
be frazzled.
Yeah, he's gonna be frazzled. He's gonna DNF.
This is the most cartoony.
Watch it happen. I'm just saying, this sport's insane, man. That's my DNF, Lance Stroll. The Canadian just can't handle the Austin street circuit, okay?
It's not a street circuit.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, so...
Look, we're winding down. We're almost at an hour. We're creeping up to it.
Getting past my bedtime.
Let me wrap it up. We've had a long streak of no DNFs. I hate to be boring. I don't think there's going to be a DNF this weekend.
I didn't know there was an option.
Well, now you know. Moving forward.
Well, don't be boring. Pick someone.
Pick someone.
Okay,
If somebody has
1A,
No. I'll do it. If somebody DNFs... If someone DNFs, I'm not spinning a fake wheel here. I think Alex Albon.
You just spend it twice.
Alex Albon.
Okay.
I
think James Vowell's gonna eat his words.
After all that confidence, driver of the day.
I think Lando's gonna be driver of the day. If he does top the podiums, if he does finish with a P1. Whatever, I'm still working on this. Okay, I'm relatively fresh in this sport. If he does finish P1, he does win the race. I think it's going to be by a large margin once again. I think Lando is driver of the day.
My driver of the day, Liam Lawson. I think Liam Lawson.
So you think he'll finish in the points?
I think he beats Yuki.
Okay.
And I think he finishes. You know what? You want my bold prediction for this?
If he's gonna finish in the points,
he finishes above Checo Perez.
Well, all right.
That's my bold.
I mean, Checo could be a DNF, and
he could be.
Liam
but that's what I'm
finish.
trying to get at. I think Liam Lawson, driver of the day, or maybe just big performance.
If Liam Lawson finishes driver of the day, he's got to be securing like a P6, P7 for me.
No. I'm saying that in the context of who has just a big weekend. Like it's like the driver of the day.
Not
stuff,
not the literal
vote.
Driver of the day. We need to rephrase this.
Yeah, I should have done a better job. We had a break. We're excuse us for being
a little
tad rusty here.
Yeah, a little rusty. But I like it. Okay.
But speaking of being rusty, we're gonna shake all it off, as we will be back next week for another edition of the F1 podcast. This lapped podcast post Austin, heading into Mexico.
Yep. Hey, guys, we got some big news coming up. I mean, we got some big things cooking the next few years. We got big things coming. Just stay tuned, stay listening, stay subscribed, just keep following. I promise, we're working on some big things.
Yeah, there's some stuff coming. I'm really excited. Kevin's really excited. This has been another episode of the Lap Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you guys in the next one.